Well, good evening, everybody, and an afternoon as well. Thank you for joining our webinar on the current right to repair consultation that is being jointly held by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Just off the top, I wanted to let you know that we will be recording this webinar so that it is available to our members who aren't able to make it this evening. The right to repair consultation is consultation that arose from the commitments that the federal Liberals made in Budget 2024. And I will note now that this consultation specifically refers to the right to repair for household appliances and consumer electronics. If you are going to respond to this consultation, your response must be submitted by September 26th, 2024. NFU staff wanted to hold this webinar for 3 reasons: to introduce NFU members to the concept and policy context for right to repair, to guide members through the consultation questionnaire, and to hear from members about the repairability and the machinery that is used on your farms. Furthermore, going through the questionnaire and discussing concerns about repairability of farm machinery is important because the consultation process on the right to repair will continue after this consultation finishes, with a roundtable discussion hosted by AAFC on the repairability of agricultural machinery. Without further ado, we'll get started and begin with some key concepts in the policy context that has led to this consultation. I will share my screen again. Is everyone able to see my slides? I don't have the chat up. I guess I should. I will take that as a yes then. Thank you. So to begin, what is the right to repair and how is the right to repair being defined by the Canadian government in this case? The Canadian government states the right to repair is about giving consumers greater choice over and information on the repair options for the products that they buy. This means that consumers must have easy access to timely repairs. Right to repair may also include the ability to use independent repair services without voiding the warranties of the products that they are using, as this is the case sometimes. An even more expansive view to the right to repair may include the ability of third-party manufacturers to produce and machine compatible parts so that consumers do not have to rely on single supply chains to fix their electronics, appliances, or equipment. Even though this consultation specifically refers to the right to repair for household appliances and consumer electronics, it is also important for farmers to get a consistent and strong right to repair regime, and this begins with consumer electronics and household appliances in this consultation. Right to repair must extend to everything from cell phones and household appliances to tractors and seed drills. Does anyone have a comment on the right to repair concept so far? Any questions? Don.
James, I'm not sure if you're going to cover this or not, but I just thought I'd mention, I was going to mention this when the CUSMA managed trade agreement was under discussions. There was some thought that the CUSMA agreement would deny Canadian farmers the right to repair their equipment, but yet the U.S. farmer would be provided with the right to repair. And the NFU was looking into this. Kathy might know some more about this, and the issue faded away. And well, things don't just fade away. It was used as a possible weapon against Canadian farmers, and I never did hear how it resolved itself, if it ever did. Yeah, just a point and a very strong concern.
Absolutely, and a great concern to have, and that's something that I had not come across while doing research for this consultation, and certainly something that will be hopefully brought up in the roundtable hosted by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. But I very much appreciate hearing about that, and certainly something that I will continue to look into the future. Dean.
You may address it, but I've always felt that right to repair is not just about the obvious repair, but also in the right to repair is how manufacturers are now building. It is kind of in that last one, that last point, but I'm not sure how you address it, or if it gets addressed, of like how parts are being made or included that make it harder to either repair, or that you're going to have to go to that manufacturer for those specific parts, which makes it harder and more expensive unnecessarily. So to me, there's that level there that is included in right to repair that may it's like a secondary section that is also very important.
I think the Canadian government might agree that it's a secondary section, given that they're not taking that more expansive view, but I think it's a very integral part. And certainly it's something they mentioned somewhat. Um, the ability for third-party manufacturers to machine parts that could only be sourced from the company itself, which made the piece of equipment. Um, I think that was the way it was mentioned in the consultation document, which I can also share in a little while. It was sort of couched in worries about intellectual property rights and you know manufacturers losing out on their intellectual property rights if they were to share details of part manufacturing with people other than themselves or their certified repair people. Um, but I think that's something that we will definitely get into, that sort of power dynamic of intellectual property rights, something that we'll get into a bit more when we get into the survey itself. Don again.
I'm not sure. I think Dean follows this topic quite a bit, but for me, what is absolutely horrifying is digital engine locks. So let's get that out of the way. And we don't know. I purchased a new Kubota 3 years ago, and I asked the manufacturer, the sales rep, does my tractor have a digital engine lock? No one knows. No one wants to say. You'll find out when it needs repairs. Terrible. Completely unacceptable.
Indeed, and that's certainly a problem when you get to interoperability or sort of customization of your equipment or software to do things on your own farm that the software may not be programmed to do in the first place. And I think what you're referring to is I think the technical term for it is technological protection measure is what that is. And there's some mention of that in the consultation. And I think that's something that's going to be expanded on a bit more during the AAFC roundtable. And that'll have to do with interoperability between manufacturers and different software programs too. Um, but it'll be interesting to see what more they talk about in terms of digital locks. Well, thank you both. Any other comments at the moment? Naomi says in the chat, digital locks and limits on repair have essentially destroyed private property for the buyer. I would agree with that, absolutely. Sort of don't own what you are supposed to own at that point in some ways. All right, we will move on. I think the right to repair is particularly important because it encompasses a number of different issues that are of importance to the NFU, but also consumers in general. The right to repair goes beyond the ability for consumers to repair electronics, appliances, and machinery. The right to repair is about independence and freedom from major manufacturers in order to have access to timely and inexpensive repairs, as well as operability between products that suit the needs of consumers and farm businesses. It is also about affordability and sustainability. Repairability and durability of products ensure that Canadians do not have to rebuy products. Durability could increase long-term cost savings for Canadians. And the issue of durability is especially important when we talk about instances where products are intentionally designed to be replaced with newer products, which is also known as planned obsolescence. The issue of planned obsolescence is also an issue of waste. Electronic waste, or e-waste, has dramatically increased. In 2021, computers, cell phones, and televisions were among the most frequently reported types of e-waste, with 15% of households having computers to dispose of, 14% having cell phones to dispose of, and 14% having televisions to discard. Repairability and durability enshrined in a right to repair in Canada would contribute to a circular economy, or so says the consultation document provided by the Canadian government. For farmers, when we expand beyond consumer electronics and household appliances, interoperability becomes a particularly important issue. Agricultural machinery companies like John Deere, CNHI, and Kubota are all manufacture machinery and more recently use software that is incompatible with other machinery and software. In many cases, much of the software cannot be used without being connected to the internet. Machinery companies are also not transparent about repair costs and often may monopolize parts, creating lengthy wait times and expensive repairs. These corporations have often also used technological protection measures, as I mentioned earlier, which are a form of copyright protections, which are put in place to stop tampering or copying of software. Technological protection measures prevent machinery usage if machinery or software is altered in a way that was not intended. I just covered a lot of what we just talked about in discussion just now, but if there's anybody who would like to comment a bit further on this, I would love to hear any comments or thoughts. Naomi, quickly in the chat, mentioned, I'm all for eliminating private property, but let's start with the property of multinational corporations. It's a good place to start. All right. Well, continuing. Although this is the first round of consultations on the right to repair as a particular concept and policy, policy does exist that carries some characteristics of the right to repair. We have two examples at the provincial level and two more recent changes at the federal level. At the provincial level, we have first Saskatchewan's Agricultural Implements Act. The Agricultural Implements Act regulates such things as minimum terms of warranty received from a dealer when buying or leasing new equipment, guidelines for emergency parts and service, and the means to obtain compensation for loss or damages because of unavailability of parts or non-fulfillment of warranty, among other things. Very recently, in 2023, we have an example, much more expansive example of the right to repair at the provincial level, which is Quebec's Bill 29, titled the Act to Protect Consumers from Planned Obsolescence and to Promote the Durability, Repairability, and Maintenance of Goods. This bill creates a legal warranty of good working order for certain commonly used new goods and creates a warranty of availability of replacement parts and repair services. It ensures that merchants and manufacturers bound by the warranty of availability must make parts, repair services, and information available at reasonable price or free of charge. These repairs, according to the bill, must also be possible with commonly available tools and without causing irreversible damage to the goods. This bill also bans planned obsolescence and prohibits the use of techniques that make it more difficult for consumers to maintain or repair goods. The bill is quite comprehensive in scope, particularly the stipulation of ensuring repairs are able to be done with commonly available tools, as I mentioned earlier. This is often a technique of manufacturers to stop people from doing their own repairs. It's kind of like turning a blender over to find you need one specific screwdriver to open a panel to make repairs that you may have lost 5 years earlier when you opened the packaging or was not even available to you in the first place. But at the federal level, we have the amendments, the Bill C-59 amendments to the Competition Act, which expanded the refusal to deal to include refusals of diagnosis or repair, especially where this constitutes an anti-competitive practice. Bill C-244 amendments to the Copyright Act additionally allow for the circumvention of a technological protection measure for the purpose of repair or diagnostic for the purpose of maintaining the product. More pertinent to this consultation and expanding on the right to repair in general, there are three key concepts and ideas that you've probably heard me mention many times at this point, which are at the core of this consultation. The first is the concept of repairability. Repairability refers to the ability of a product, system, or device to be fixed or restored to its working condition after it has been damaged. The repairability of a product can be measured by a number of factors, including ease of disassembly to repair or replace parts, cost of repair, length of time to receive a spare part or repair service, the freedom to choose a favorable repair option that is not necessarily tied to after-sale services offered by the original manufacturer. Second, you have interoperability, which is defined as the degree to which software systems, devices, or applications can connect or communicate with each other or with other entities in a coordinated manner without effort from the end user. Interoperability works on multiple levels. The first level is the interoperability between electronics and parts in the same device, allowing the device to function properly. Interoperability can also permit the interaction between two different pieces of equipment or software, possibly from different manufacturers. And finally, durability. Durability simply refers to the ability of a product or material to withstand wear, pressure, or damage over time. Durability becomes an issue in the case of planned obsolescence, which is defined as intentionally designing products to be replaced with newer products. Any comments or thoughts about that before we move on? Don.
James, I'm just back to the digital engine locks. If I asked a farm machinery retailer, is there a digital engine lock on the piece of equipment, the tractor that the dealer is trying to sell, I would think that I am entitled to an answer. And pleading ignorance is not an answer. I think that, you know, holding these folks with their feet to the fire in terms of demanding an answer is maybe the start of it, and it's the whole area is gray. I don't know which well on just what I said. I'm not sure which one of the three would describe it, but I'm just wondering if yeah, how would you describe it?
I think it would probably fall under the issue of repairability. I think ease of access and having relevant information to the product in order to fix it, either yourself or through a third party, I think is probably what that would refer to if you're but I think, you know, in terms of the landscape right now, you know, you're right, as they should be able to give you an answer directly about whether or not there's a technological protection measure on the software or on the piece of machinery.
Yeah.
But theoretically, and perhaps this is bad faith,
Yes.
hiding behind the sort of like terms of use or user agreement that might be signed along with your machine and the piece of software accompanying it is probably, you know, uh, what they're hiding behind. It's sort of like logging onto Facebook and or downloading whatever other software and these massive user agreements or terms of use that are tied to them. And, you know, nobody's going to read that, but it's certainly uh it certainly hides the reality of what you're actually agreeing to when it's couched in all of that legal jargon. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I feel like that's the sort of unofficial policy of many software manufacturers.
There was a answer that someone at John Deere US responded to with this topic and asked, when you buy a new John Deere tractor, what do you get? And the answer that some John Deere executive gave was, you have, when you purchase a John Deere tractor, you have the right to operate it. And that's all. Which is really not much of an answer. And yeah.
Well, I think it's an answer. I don't think it's a good answer, and one that's certainly bad for for farmers. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, you're right to do one particular thing with it, and actually not own it is a is an answer and a problematic one, and certainly something that I guess Naomi is pointing to. It's an issue of more than repairability. It's the seller retaining the right to sabotage the device, or at least be not be transparent about the working condition of the machine that you theoretically own and should be able to operate and repair
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we head on to the actual questionnaire itself? All right. I will stop sharing my, oh, Dean, please.
Sorry. Only doing this because I know I'm not sure where you're gonna head. So then at a Crop Connect in Manitoba, several years now. It almost feels like 3 or 4 years ago, but they brought in a workshop, but they brought in like the Manufacturers Association, which is like, not two sides of a story, but one side, right? And for us, and they only go for an hour, right? And then there's no questions. I mean, that's how those ones are because they only have an hour. They make them nice and compact, but it doesn't benefit, deep questioning. So the argument on that side has been somewhat of a and so there's some points you have to like cross examine, right? Like so, and I think it's important to recognize what some of them are, and some of them are like there's some fair points to like, do I want someone to just easily be able to get inside, use the software, and then just be able to adjust it, and then and then all of a sudden there's bugs in the system, right? On a software side. Um, and so okay, so I think that is a fair point. But if there's someone knowledgeable that maybe can make an improvement, where's the avenue for that? Like, I mean, we've had software for years where you just always wish they'd have some extra stuff. You'd always wish they'd have the extra stuff available to add a few things, right? So I think there's some interesting things there. Also when in terms of retail and automobiles, my friend is in it, but now they're not just making things with steel, it's multiple levels of products within the material. So it's almost makes it very difficult to replicate. It's not just plastic, it's not just steel, there's carbon fibers mixed with plastic in these things. So their argument might be that it's just not that easy to replicate, because of the lightness that people want in their vehicles and making these products. And is it anyway? So I think some of those points will come out, and it'll be interesting how we um, push back against some points like that.
Yeah, certainly. I think that comment you made about material is important too. I think you can in a right to repair policy, you can say, oh well, does that extend to the ability of third party manufacturers if they're machining a part? Um, you know,
Yeah.
is that going to be a barrier for them to actually do that? And is that a way for people to get around, giving designs to third party people or consumers or the actual users of the equipment? I think that's important. And so
Yeah, that's a good
there's
question.
certainly loopholes in some. I don't want to use the term loopholes necessarily, but there's certainly I guess some weaknesses in not being um specific or taking a look at how this actually plays out on the ground. I think it's great to have a very overarching and broad view of how right to repair policy might look, but it's sort of, I guess, different when you are on the ground and actually have to do some of these repairs. Um, but certainly a lot of the points that have been brought up so far, I think this has been really great so far, because there's some of this is in the guide that was put together to the consultation, but um, a lot of this is new and some considerations that hadn't come to me before. So this is very exciting and I appreciate it a lot. Naomi is mentioning open source software platforms, which function just as well as proprietary ones. Example of open office. So they're definitely methods of managing the extension of software by multiple parties. Certainly. And I was going to say a second ago too that the consultation, as I mentioned earlier, is talking about the risks of imposing on copyright. One of the other issues too is or the idea of not having an expansive right to repair might also be rationalized by encouraging having information or parts available might encourage consumers to make repairs or make alterations to their equipment or appliances that is perhaps harmful to them or to their equipment, which I push back a little bit in this guide, which is important, but I think people aren't dumb. And I think if they're making repairs already, they're probably already doing it. Or if they have the option to, they're probably already doing it. Don.
James, this proposed consultation, I would like to think, is about choice and the importance of consumer choice. The price of machinery, like everything manufactured in the world right now, has really skyrocketed in price. The consumer is just overwhelmed by the price of some of these things. The natural human reaction is, well, if you can't afford to buy something that's brand new, then buy it used. But the manufacturers themselves, I've seen this in steak trucks. You get a 30-year-old steak truck that is considered to be an antique. It is priced, it has its own sort of pricing schedule that makes no economic sense whatsoever. The idea of just because it's old means that the manufacturer can surcharge the retail product makes no sense at all. The consumer is not being served, or whether it's new or used. And I think most of the major tractor manufacturers, you get parts for a lot of parts for a 40-year-old tractor, and you're going to be shocked by the price of it. It makes no sense whatsoever. If you can even get the part, and there should be. There was a time where you could get parts. I don't know what the statute of limitations was for manufacturing parts, but you could get parts for a long time. It was never an issue. Well, now all of a sudden, maybe you don't want to hold on to a 40-year-old tractor. I have a 42-year-old tractor. So far, it's not an issue, but I stay away from my dealer as much as possible.
Yes, certainly. Like the affordability aspect arguably could be put under ease of access, so there, but again, it's sort of getting into that issue of like if we take it a very expansive or sort of no, what I was saying earlier about this very comprehensive view of the right to repair in some cases, but when it actually comes to implementing it and carrying it out on the ground, um, ease of access should probably look like inexpensive parts, just as the Quebec legislation mentioned, but they mentioned that specifically. In this case, it's just ease of access. And so what exactly does ease of access mean? It can be very broad, but it could also be interpreted very narrowly. And that's something that I did not necessarily consider when doing this guide. So when you're filling out the guide, please include that. I think that's really important. I have a few comments in the chat as well. Glenn Wright says there are many diesel shops in Saskatchewan and Alberta that advertise pollution control deletion, removing diesel exhaust fluid systems and particulate filters of catalytic converters. We could likely get many Freedom Convoy supporters interested in advocating for the right to repair too. I'll leave that up to you, Glenn, to reach out to them. And then Dean quickly included, most tractor companies use their own software, so it is much more unlikely for an open source replacement solution. Well, certainly something to consider. I mean, in right to repair, are we sort of legitimizing current software options, but just giving a new avenue to repair, or do we want to look for something different in this case too? And is that solution open source software for operation of farm machinery? I think that's a really interesting question. Thank you, Dean. Don again.
This is a good point. I purchased a 3-year-old Kubota. When I asked my sales rep, how do I operate a dev system? He had no idea. The manual didn't really tell me anything. The maintenance manager knew nothing about it. He could figure it out. No one knew anything about it. It took me about a year of serious consultations with one technician who described to me how to operate and maximize the use of the DEF system. If it wasn't for him, I don't know what I would have done. I have no problems with DEF. It requires a complete rethink of how you operate a tractor. To me, Kubota is selling well. To me, it's shocking that a sales rep cannot explain the proper way to operate a DEF system. A service manager cannot explain how to operate a service system. The public is watching. All it requires is putting a load on the engine at all times, a lot of revs. I have absolutely no fear at all. I'm not sure about the North American manufacturers, but DEF is not to be feared. You just have to change the way you operate the farm machinery. And to me, these manufacturers and retailers are not serving the industry, and they are on very thin ice. They should be ashamed of themselves. The public is watching. When I see stories like that, yeah, okay, if you want to bypass the system, go ahead and do it. But all it requires is just a slight change in philosophy and keeping DEF fluid around. Absolutely, I have no fear at all. It's shameful that this industry cannot educate their consumer base.
Yeah, and certainly that's something that should not be happening. You should be able to go to your dealership and have the piece of equipment explained to you. But um, I think for the most part, you know, John Deere and Kubota and CNHI, they don't, beyond you taking the tractor to the dealership and paying the dealer, they don't think they really care about what happens after that. It's that you've bought the equipment and that you've signed on to an agreement that they will be servicing your equipment for probably an exorbitant fee and using software that you know they may be charging you for the amount of time that you used to operate that software on the field. And if if you have trouble operating in the field and it takes a little bit longer, excellent. That's more hours that you're paying to a subscription service to use that software. And of course, you mentioned that they should be ashamed of providing such a shoddy service. But at the end of the day, I mean, if everyone's doing it and there's four manufacturers, what are you going to do? Right? And so, I mean, you start to get it. We've gotten now into very larger political economic dynamics in some ways of market concentration. But yeah, it would be interesting to see how far machinery companies can push farmers on this before things start to crack, if they do.
Just as an example, this technician, a great guy, great young man, he was describing to me an orchard operator here in Southern Ontario buys a Kubota tractor for use in his orchard. A neighbor stops in and the two of them talk for 15 minutes with this Kubota with a DEF system idling. After 15 minutes, the motor on that Kubota was pooched, destroyed. Totally irresponsible. I didn't know. Nobody told him. Yeah, just don't care.
No.
It's, and I think that, how is the consumer being serviced, with things like this when it's totally unnecessary?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no reason for it.
No.
Glenn in the chat says Don's comments about dealer knowledge certainly applies to all EVs and car dealers. They usually try push consumers not to buy EVs. Case IH has been selling an electric tractor in EU for more than a year, but refuses to offer it in North America. A Farmall 75C electric version would be a great seller here. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, any other comments before we move on to the questionnaire? Excellent. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen briefly and switch over. Can everybody see my screen in the first page of the consultation? I will also put a link to the NFU guide and the questionnaire into this chat in case you wanted to follow along while I go through this. So this first page, I think, just gives you a quick overview of the consultation. Certainly not as good as the one that I gave you just now, but we can just scroll to the bottom of this page and click next page. But you also have the option of this save and continue later, which will send you a special link to your email, or you can resume the survey from where you left off if you don't want to finish it in one session. Excellent. Okay. The second page on the consultation is a question about your employment status. So if you're doing this, please pick what is appropriate for your employment status. So for example, if you own a farm, you could answer as a Canadian business or simply as an interested Canadian. If you do not, I will be selecting an interested Canadian and hitting next page. The second question asks you to consider how Canada should approach the right to repair, as it necessarily involves manufacturers, repairers, and consumers. Recall also that consumer protection legislation is a shared responsibility between provincial and federal governments, making the right to repair a shared responsibility in our federal system. So this question, I'll go back to our guide quickly in my other tab and scroll to the second question here. The NFU believes that the right to repair should be expansive and address a number of factors, including ease of access to spare parts, and you could include access to parts that are made out of the correct materials, or ease of access in terms of price, reasonably priced spare parts, warranties, knowledge of and ability for consumers to access appropriate repair options as well. Consumers and independent repair technicians' attempts at repair should not be hampered by appeals to copyright law. Finally, when thinking about the right to repair as a shared responsibility, the NFU believes that there should be an overarching federal right to repair framework in conjunction with the Copyright and Competition Acts, which is important to ensuring consistent consumer protection and certainty. So I can now, in this page, highlight this text and copy it over to the consultation and use that as my answer to this question. Does anybody have any additional thoughts, consideration, or questions that they'd like to add for this question here before we move on? Okay. If not, we'll just hit the next page and continue. Oh, Dean, please go ahead.
No, I just it's part of our conversation here to maybe improve or expand those points. Is that what we're
Sure,
doing?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've certainly would love to hear any other or
No,
additional answers.
I mean, even some of your points there, it's like I mean, it's a very broad question, right? A
Yeah,
lot. But like I like the point that, and maybe I'm missing it. Maybe you did it. So if I do, I'm sorry. But just that the point is they're viewing it as just repair. It's also like how you factor, it's how you manufacture to allow for repair, right? Like to me, that's as vital as part of the point as the obvious. The obvious is, can I repair this product? But but then the second is it built to allow, you know, easy to repair? So like I could take it to a guy who repairman, but they're like, I can't repair that because I
yeah,
don't have the tools or the proper parts, you know, those types of things, right? To me, that's
right.
like whereas I had a water pump where they did the right thing and they made it with the generic uh with generic bearings where you could get anywhere. Well, yeah,
Right.
that's great. They're a smaller company. They did it easier, right? So they did it, but you're a big company. It's like, great, I want to make more parts that is exclusive to us. Like so, but you didn't have to.
Certainly. And I think Kathy's point in the chat just now, saying that this sounds like a question of design, I think is a really important point. So yeah, how are we designing things to actually be repaired? You know, if you have, again, if you have access to all the tools in the world, if something is made in a specific way by a particular manufacturer and that's the only way to do it, then it's not really repairable. And certainly that issue of design doesn't really come up in this consultation. I think that's a great point, Don.
Oh, it doesn't. Yeah,
Um,
it's a second part. It's like the half. It's the other half that's just as crucial.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely.
James, there was a time, maybe 30 years ago, where we had mostly mechanics and the odd sprinkling of technicians in dealerships. And the philosophy always was, if a component failed on a piece of machinery, you would do the diagnostics. You had equipment to do the diagnostic assessment of what component failed, what component of the air or hydraulic or the motor oil or the cooling system. You could do, your technician or mechanic could do the diagnostic. Now, no one diagnoses much of anything, just replace the whole unit. And I'm not sure, and that has changed. They
Right,
don't want to diagnose, just replace the whole thing.
right. Absolutely. Okay, well, let's go back then. Let's go to the previous page and we'll add to that answer. We'll see. Right to repair. Right to repair should extend to the design of a product, allowing for generic parts to replace any failed or worn down components of appliances and consumer electronics. The ability to diagnose an issue should also be able, should also should also be readily available.
The ability to diagnose a failed component
Yes, thank you.
should be retained.
Should be retained. Thank you, Don. Excellent. Okay, well, with that extra sentence, those very important sentences added, we can continue. Actually, Kathy has a few points to make. Even how the engine compartment is designed, making it impossible to reach the bolt, for example. Indeed. The benefit for the company of just replacing parts or whole products instead of fixing them also allows them to have de-skilled labor, reducing their costs as a company, replacing labor with garbage. Important. Indeed. Malfunctioning equipment does end up in the dump. Absolutely. All right, well, we can hit next page and continue. And certainly this is worth updating the guide later on as well. I'll certainly take all of these suggestions and ask them to be uploaded to the NFU website for other members to see as well. That's really important. So question 3 in this questionnaire asks about the scope of repairability policy in Canada for consumer electronics and household appliances. The background document for this consultation stated that not every appliance has a similar ease of repair and that a right to repair could encourage consumers to attempt to repair appliances or electronics where it is not safe for them to do so. There were also worries about providing information for the intent of repairs that would allow consumers to modify appliances or electronics in ways that are not meant to be used or that would jeopardize the trade secrets of manufacturers. Question 3 then asks, in your view, which home appliances and consumer electronics should be in scope in a federal repairability policy and why? So the NFU recommends that you answer that all home appliances and consumer electronics should be considered within the scope of a federal repairability policy. While there may be differences between major home appliances and smaller appliances or other electronic devices, a framework that allows for the adequate repair and interoperability of these products is important to ensure consistency amongst products. Home appliances and consumer electronics should be able to be repaired and operate independent of their connectivity or reliance on the Internet of Things. Turning off connectivity must be allowed and easily done. I think that point is particularly important as it relates to farm machinery, as it's generally connected or it relies on the use of uploading to the internet or connecting with the internet to operate. And I didn't include this, but I did mention this earlier. And to address the issues with consumer safety during repairs and altered use products, you could include some points about how having proper repair guides would actually make consumers more safe, and that most consumers will only use items for their intended purpose. I believe that those with malicious intent will already seek out ways to alter products for different uses, and those who are looking to repair things will probably already attempt to repair them, but with less knowledge to do so in a safe manner. Naomi in the chat mentions to make the right to repair extend beyond the monopoly of the company that sold it to you, we need a mechanism of certifying repair companies and their staff. Yeah, certainly that was something that came up in the consultation document as well of the certified third-party repairers is important. Naomi says it would possibly allow for an exception for critical medical devices. Yeah, that's not included in these in in this consultation, but I think is certainly an interesting idea. Um, yeah, luckily we're not the National Doctors Union. We're just the National Farmers Union. I don't have to get into into issues of medicine. So for this, I will just copy and paste the NFU answer. With a few punctuation fixes. And before we move on, does anybody else have any comments about this question or the answer to this question? Okay, we will continue on then. Oh, Don?
James, I'm just looking at all of this for the first time, but I don't know if there's a future, if there's a further question on this, but the price of components, repair components, can be priced in such a way as to encourage the throwing out of these devices. And if we're going to all the trouble of doing this, then we better do this right. Component replacement should be priced in a sensible way.
Yeah.
Rather than just told by a technician, well, you can buy a brand new unit for $700, but this part is going to cost you $450. That old trap. All of this is a trap.
Yeah, and certainly that goes into the ease of access piece we were talking about before of like
good.
If cost is a barrier to getting that fixed, then you really don't have the right to repair. You just have the right to buy a replacement. But yeah, I would encourage you all to sort of keep that thread of expanding what is considered a barrier into your answers if you're going to do this question. I think that's really important, Dean.
What is the purpose of this question? Like, do they offer any examples of where it may not be, like where this shouldn't come in? Like that's what they're asking. Like, so what should not be included? And so it's like, so where did that come from? Like, do they have examples? Like, because you need an example. In my mind, you need an example for this.
Yeah,
Like,
they were
justify.
Sorry about that. Yeah, they were very vague in the consultation document that they provided. I think again, it's that the two reasons that I provided earlier of if consumers are given the information and the parts to repair things that are dangerous for them to repair might result in further harm to them, then perhaps that would be a case where you don't want the right to repair to exist. I can't think of a household appliance off the top of my head that would be like threatening to a person, but I guess I need some help on expanding that thought, if anybody has any. And then the other one would be, I guess, in the case of software, altering software code, or if you have access to how software is
Right.
designed,
But
there's
it's like
issues of
based on, right, but it's based on like the type, not basing it on type repair, just which should be repaired. So like clearly anything that you can plug in or has a battery attached or any electricity has a slight risk. Okay. So that's fine. The risk
yeah,
exists. Doesn't mean like the type of repair. So anyway, I just find it that's why I was asking if there's more to it, because which should be in the scope. And while you just, well, just so who's gonna put just toasters, just toasters
yeah,
and beauty products. That's it.
yeah.
Who's saying that?
That's
Like your hair.
certainly I have no idea. But yeah, I think again it's sort of, I guess it's they're looking for that split between appliances and like
Repair.
software. Oh,
Uh,
pardon me, Al
I had a good day at school.
Alice, I think you're
Oh,
unmuted.
sorry. I didn't.
That's okay. I think that they're looking for that split between household appliances and perhaps like software, where if you're given the designs to certain software, you might have a backdoor into the company's networks through software loopholes, or if you're altering software in malicious ways, that could be tied back to the manufacturer, or issues of intellectual property, right? So I think that's what they're looking for. But I think you've been a great point, Dean. Kathy.
Yeah, just my thoughts on this is that consultation is also including industry associations, the Chamber of Commerce, government agencies, and so on. So it's not just getting input from regular, Canadians. There'll be different interests, and there may be some that would have an interest in keeping something out of scope, or really thinking, well, if they're probably not going to do everything, but we really want this to be in scope. So that might be why they have this scope question.
Yeah, certainly. And Naomi, I think, is building on that in the chat of looking for loopholes to allow corporate lobbyists to expand their list of exceptions. I mean, yeah, I think that's certainly the case. I was taking a very innocent look at why they might be looking at exceptions. But yeah, these are very important. And you would recall at the beginning of the survey that they're asking whether you're responding as a manufacturer or a business owner of some kind, and they'll ask more about your status as a manufacturer later on in the questionnaire as well. So I think it's very important.
Like, is there anything in the agriculture category that we should include, like specifically? Because they're actually, I think, looking for some specific. So, like that, like we're very basic. They're actually asking for which one should be included in there. Like that's why I maybe I should throw that out. Like, are we looking for GPS units, or is that still consumer electronics, right? Like, what are we including in there?
Yeah, well, I think given the scope of the questionnaire, I think given that it's on household appliances and consumer electronics, I don't know what exception they would be looking for, because I have not been able to think of one that, should have an exception to it.
But something that's borderline consumer and borderline industry, maybe we should include something. You know what I'm saying? Like, um,
Try B. It's really quite. Oh, it is. I think it's a good deal.
Yeah, I don't know if they're looking for anything specific. Yeah, I would leave that up to the rest of you to answer that question. I can't think of anything at the moment. I mean, like, yeah, like the point about borderline consumer and industry is interesting, but yeah, I don't know. I think there's some pretty clear cut like legal definitions on that I don't know well enough myself, but I think that they certainly do exist. Any thoughts on this question before we continue again? Okay, we'll hit next page and continue. Okay. Question 4 asks whether you are primarily a manufacturer. Again, they're asking for manufacturers, repairer, or consumer. What considerations do you have related to the repairability, interoperability, and durability of home appliances or consumer electronics? So as a staff member, I don't purport to know what considerations you have about the repairability of home appliances or consumer electronics, or even what appliances you regularly use. So instead, I've included some questions to guide any thoughts you might have for this question, including, I'll go to the survey quickly. How do you use home appliances or consumer electronics for your business? If you are a farm business and you may use consumer electronics for your farm business, what issues do you have with the lifespan of your appliances and their repairability, and how does that affect your business operations? I know some direct sellers or small scale growers go to farmers markets, and this is what I was thinking of in this case when you're talking about business operations.
Well, I wasn't
So,
sure whether I had the speaker on or not, but I don't have.
oh, Alice, I believe you're still unmuted.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. But if anybody wants to throw any answers out to those questions right now, that would be interesting to hear. I think answering these questions can help you think a bit more about how a repairability policy would impact business operations or your daily life, and perhaps even show you the importance of having a strong right to repair policy in Canada. Some of these impacts, again, would include affordability and reduced environmental impact and waste. Don.
James, careful what you ask for. I keep on thinking that we should, or maybe before you do this survey, contact the Consumers Association and go through their fact sheet to determine what they consider to be acceptable service. I have no idea what acceptable is, because everything is generally of such poor service that we don't know what the normal is. But I think if I have till the 26th to fill this out, I think I'm going to go look at the Consumers Association of Canada and see what their expectations are.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's really important. Thanks, Don. And I encourage you all to do the same then. Although I think it's also important too that we think of a more expansive version, or even think of right now what acceptable service looks like in this moment. So certainly we should be informed by people who have thought about this already, but I think we can also think up pretty easily what acceptable service looks like to us, and how that might differ from the Consumers Association. So question 5 on this page as well asks, what further actions could the government of Canada undertake to strengthen the repairability, interoperability, and durability of home appliances or consumer electronics? The NFU has provided the following talking points, including arguing that policies and regulations that would allow for repairability to be done by independent or third-party manufacturers to reduce replacement parts is important for ease of access to repair options. We also believe that there should be a clear definition of what durability means in terms of lifespan. Is durability 25 years or 50 years? Importantly to the NFU and farmers as well, rural areas are unique in that they do not have large enough markets to facilitate the operation of licensed dealers or manufacturing outlets. In some cases, the remoteness of rural areas is important when considering the timely repair component of the right to repair. Furthermore, those seeking repairs in rural communities should not bear any additional costs for repairs due to their geography. Any additions or other thoughts on that question? Don.
James, we see this in the big box stores that they sell lawnmowers and all kinds of electronic goods. They'll sell it, but don't think that the retailer can fix it for you. There should be an understanding that if a retailer is selling something, he should be able to provide a repair service. And I can't believe, living in a small village, the number of people who buy these, appliances or lawnmowers from big box stores, and then they complain that they can't get it fixed. Well, it was made very clear to you, they'll sell it to you, but they don't fix anything.
I think it's an excellent point. I mean, why duplicate? I mean, theoretically, retailers could have the ability to repair the products that they're selling as well, as opposed to offloading that onto somebody else. Especially, they might even have a responsibility to do so if they're selling the product to consumers. So
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point, and something to include as extra as I am doing now currently.
Yeah.
Any other additions or thoughts at the moment? Okay. We shall move on. Again, there are two more questions on this page. Question 6 asks, what are your views on a preferred approach to further advancing repairability and policy in Canada, and why? I think in this question, it's important to focus on the preferred approach piece. In the consultation documents, Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada outlined multiple approaches, which considered balancing the intellectual property of manufacturers with the needs of consumers, as well as the involvement of independent repair companies. Following this, the NFU has provided some points to consider, which include discussing arguments for manufacturers regarding the protection of intellectual property and proprietary parts should not prevent the existence of a comprehensive right to repair, providing consumers and independent or certified repairers with the knowledge and parts to do repairs will not jeopardize the economic positions of manufacturers. Simply put, repairers will not be able to meet the scale and efficiency of production that current manufacturers hold if that's what they are worried about. And certainly the question of scale brings back considerations about competition and corporate power. Manufacturers, particularly large appliance and electronics manufacturers, have an immense amount of economic power. This also extends to farm machinery manufacturers, which is outside of the scope of this questionnaire, unfortunately. Having a fleet of independent repair companies working on their products, these manufacturers' products, will not be able to match the amount of working capital or market share that these companies hold. It simply increases consumer freedom to have this option. The NFU believes that consumers should be protected and enabled first and foremost. And finally, repairability and interoperability must apply to imported products as well as those manufactured in Canada. Any thoughts? Don again.
James, I don't know if we have one in Canada or not, but a consumer bill of rights.
That's a good question. That is a good question. I don't know. I think that's something certainly to look into as well in this case. So thank you. Does anybody in the chat or anybody else want to speak up quickly to weigh in on that if they have knowledge of a consumer bill of rights in Canada? Okay. All right. Question 7 asks, what considerations do you have in relation to a federal policy approach for Canada? I think similar to our previous answer, the NFU simply believes that an overarching federal right to repair framework in conjunction with the Copyright and Competition Acts is important for ensuring consistency in consumer protection and certainty. You could go further in this question to say that the federal framework should not prevent provinces from having measures that go beyond the federal policy to increase access to repair, and that the federal policy must have a reasonably high bar to ensure all Canadians have adequate access to the right to repair. simply a question of division of powers in the federal system and how they interact. Naomi says there's a Consumer Bill of Rights in Alberta, but I don't know what's in it. I will go and investigate after this meeting. Thank you. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is that as I mentioned at the top, there's certainly a split in power for consumer protection between the federal and provincial governments. So it could be different in every province, and certainly as you've seen, the bill in Quebec is very comprehensive, and I think has addressed a lot of the issues that have been brought up during this webinar so far. And it would be great to have that at the federal level, just in case a province does not act on or does not want to act on this. So consideration of division of powers is very important. There's a few links in the chat from Dean. I think the first one is the Alberta Consumer Bill of Rights. And the second is from the Office of Consumer Affairs in Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada regarding consumer protection legislation in Canada, which probably give a good list of consumer protection legislation at the provincial and federal level, I would assume. Worth checking out. So I will bring in some answers from the guide. We can continue on. I will hit next. Question 8, that's the final content question. This questionnaire is, are there any considerations that have been missed or elements that should be explored further when addressing this topic when they mean the right to repair? And I think for the NFU, we want to take this opportunity to talk about rural populations and how right to repair must consider these cases. So importantly, in rural areas, the availability of repair options has diminished greatly due to consolidation and closure of machinery shops and repair services, as well as equipment dealers. I think while this is a particular concern for farm machinery, this can also be true for home appliances and consumer electronics. Therefore, the particular conditions of rural areas must be considered when discussing the feasibility of repairability. And finally, to address the point again of manufacturers using copyright law as a barrier to consumers and independent repairers to repair products. Is there anything else from this evening that we have not talked about that you think would fit well in this comment question? I know we've done a lot of discussion already, which is amazing. But if there's any other thoughts that you have at the moment, it would be great to hear. Okay, well, I will add my points in the guide. Hit next. And the last questions on this questionnaire are simply demographic questions, and you can fill that out as appropriate. So I am not applicable. They're asking you if you're responding on half of a business. This page. And then they're asking you whether or not you're a manufacturer, which again, I think relates to what should or should not be included in the repairability policy, as you may have interests in what is or is not repairable. Well, you can fill out the rest of these demographic questions and hit submit at the end. I do not I do not manufacture products in Canada. And then this question 12 is, would your business be interested in participating in targeted roundtable discussions, which would include the one that AFC is holding on agricultural machinery. And I'm happy to say that the NFU has been included as an organization included at the roundtable. So for any of you who have any thoughts on this issue, referring specifically to agricultural machinery, it would be great to hear more of them. If you could get in contact with me after the webinar, that would be excellent. I'll put my email in the chat. You can also find me on the NFU website. And certainly it would be great to have a very comprehensive set of talking points heading into the roundtable, as I'm very interested to see who else will be there participating. Should be interesting. But theoretically, you could also enter your own email here and see what happens. I think that would be interesting. 6, age group, identify. And then a final demographic question. And that's the end of the survey. Just hit submit when you're done, and you'll be finished. I'll stop sharing my screen quickly and just say thank you all for coming this evening. It was really great to hear the feedback on this and some extra considerations when talking about the right to repair. Again, I will urge you to fill out the questionnaire using the amended NFU guide by September 26, 2024, or with any thoughts you have yourself. I think this is really important to get groundwork for the right to repair in Canada, especially as we move into consultations on agricultural machinery. I will again